Little Fox.
Black Beauty, Chapter 15. A bad decision and a good one. I know that little Joe meant to do his best for me after my exhausting run for the doctor. But he hadn't been working at the stable long and didn't know much yet. When he brought me into my stall, I was dripping with sweat. He rubbed my legs and chest, but didn't put anything over me to keep me warm. He thought I was so warm already that I wouldn't like it. Then he brought me lots of cold water. It tasted good when I was hot, so I gulped it all down. Little Joe thought I must be hungry after working so hard. He brought me a bucket of corn. Not long after that, I began to tremble and feel very cold. My legs and chest ached. My stomach felt tight. I was sore all over. Little Joe had left by then. I stood there for a long time, wishing I wasn't so cold. Finally, I collapsed onto the straw and tried to sleep. I woke up when I heard John at the door. He'd finally finished his long walk home and had come to check on me. I let out a moan of distress. John was at my side in an instant.
"Oh, Beauty!"
he exclaimed.
"What has that stupid boy done?"
I couldn't tell him how bad I felt, but he seemed to know. He grabbed a blanket and draped it over me. Then he brought me some warm food. I felt a little better after I finished it, and I fell asleep. The next day I was still very sick. I had a fever and couldn't breathe without pain. John stayed by my side, and the squire came to my stall to see me several times.
"My poor Beauty,"
he said.
"you saved your mistress's life. Do you know that? If it had taken the doctor any longer to get here, it would have been too late."
"There was no chance of arriving too late with Beauty,"
John said.
"I never saw a horse go so fast. It seemed as if he knew what was wrong."
Of course I knew, even if John didn't realize it. Maybe I didn't understand everything. But I understood that I had to go fast, and that it was for the sake of the mistress. I'm not sure how many days passed while I was sick. The vet came every day. John moved Ginger and Merrylegs into another part of the stable so I wouldn't be disturbed. Finally, I got better, to everyone's relief. I could tell that little Joe felt terrible. He'd learned his lesson, and he'd never make those mistakes again. John stayed angry with little Joe for a long while. But as time passed, and Joe kept trying to learn, John started to trust him again. One day, the squire needed to send a note to a neighboring estate. John was out, so the squire told little Joe to saddle me.
"I know you haven't ridden much,"
he told little Joe.
"but Beauty will take care of you. Just ride carefully and you'll be fine."
Little Joe wasn't a skilled rider, but he was gentle and careful. We delivered the note, then started for home. On the way, we passed a muddy field. A two-horse cart was stuck there. It was piled high with heavy bricks. The driver was yelling and whipping his two horses again and again. Little Joe brought me to a halt.
"Stop beating those horses!"
He called.
"They can't move the cart with all those bricks in it. The wheels are stuck in the mud."
The man ignored him. He lashed the horses once more.
"Please stop!"
Little Joe cried.
"I'll help you unload some bricks. Maybe then they can pull out the cart."
"Mind your own business!"
the man yelled. Little Joe turned me around.
"Come on, Beauty.
He whispered.
We'd better tell that man's boss what's going on before he kills those horses."
He kicked me into a gallop. We raced to the brickmaker's house, and Little Joe told him what was happening.
Thanks for letting me know.
The brickmaker said.
I'll put a stop to it right now.
When we got home, John could see that Little Joe looked angry. He asked what was wrong, and Little Joe told him the whole story.
Well done!
John said when the boy had finished.
Many people would have ridden past and not done anything. But it's everybody's business to put a stop to cruelty when they see it.
Little Joe looked shy and proud of himself at the same time. After that, there was something different about him. John said it was as if the boy had grown an inch taller that day. I believe it was true. Black Beauty, Chapter 16, More Changes. I'd lived at Birtwick Park for several years and was happy there. Even Ginger was content now. But sad changes were coming. The mistress was ill more and more often. The doctor was at the house a lot, and the squire always looked worried and distracted.
Did you hear the news?
John asked Little Joe one day in the stable.
What news?
Little Joe asked.
It's the mistress.
John said sadly.
The doctor says her health will only get worse if she stays here. She needs to move to a warmer place right away. The whole family will be leaving soon.
Oh no!
Little Joe's face went pale.
Poor mistress. And what's going to happen to the rest of us?
I don't know. I guess we'll find out soon enough.
After that, John was always silent and sad as he worked. Little Joe hardly ever whistled anymore. People came and went from the estate more often than usual, and Ginger and I had plenty of work carrying them around. The first people to leave Birtwick Park were the squire's young daughters, Miss Jessie and Miss Flora. The two little girls came to say goodbye to all of us horses, especially Merrylegs, their favorite. They hugged him so tightly, I thought they'd never let go. When their nanny pulled them away, both girls were crying. John and Little Joe looked sadder than ever as they watched the girls leave.
I suppose that's the beginning of the end,
John said.
Soon the whole family will be gone.
What will happen to Merrylegs now?
Little Joe asked.
The squire says the minister wants him.
John replied.
He needs a pony for his housekeeper to ride on errands, and Merrylegs is perfect for the job. The minister promised never to sell him, but to keep him for the rest of his life.
That sounds good.
Little Joe looked at Ginger and me.
What about the other horses?
The squire already agreed to sell Black Beauty and Ginger to an old friend of his,
John said.
They'll have a good home.
I looked at Ginger and she at me. This was the first we'd heard about it. I wasn't sure how to feel. I'd missed Birtwick Park, but I was glad to have a place to go. Later we heard that the minister wanted Little Joe to come and work for him and take care of Merrylegs. I was glad. Both of them would be happy to have a familiar face around. The squire had found new homes for his other horses too. Soon it was almost time for the squire and his wife to leave. The squire came to the stable to give us horses a last pat.
Have you decided what to do with yourself, John?
He asked.
I think I want to become a horse trainer,
John said.
I've seen so many horses ruined by bad early training. I'd love to fix the ruined ones and give others a good start.
I can't think of anyone better for that kind of job,
The squire said.
I'll write to some friends of mine about you. I'm sure they can help you get started.
John thanked him, and the squire thanked him in return for his years of faithful service. For a moment, neither man seemed to know what else to say. Then it was time to go. The other servants had taken most of the luggage away the day before. When Ginger and I pulled the carriage to the front door of the house, there were only a few bags and trunks to load. Then the squire came out carrying his wife in his arms. He set her gently inside the carriage and then climbed in himself. With a last goodbye to the remaining servants, we were off. It didn't take long to reach the nearest railroad station. When we got there, the mistress climbed out of the carriage on her own.
Goodbye, John.
She said in her soft, sweet voice.
Thank you for everything. We'll miss you.
Little Joe had climbed out to stand by our heads while the railway workers unloaded the luggage. I could see tears running down his face. Soon the train came puffing into the station. There was lots of hustle and bustle for a few minutes with people getting on and off and workers running around. Then a whistle blew and the train chugged away again, leaving behind nothing but smoke. John watched the whole time. When the train disappeared, he sighed.
We'll never see her again,
He said quietly.
never.
He and little Joe climbed back onto the carriage, and we set off for home, only it wasn't our home anymore. No, Birtwick Park would never be our home again.
Little Fox.